time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Joan, as always, exceptional work from you from, your TV days all the way up to today. You're truly exceptional, and thanks for this great show you have.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Oh, welcome to Bad Attitude Tuesday. It's Tuesday, July 14th, and it is indeed Bad Attitude Tuesday. But you know what? Always happens. Tuesday is always the low point of the week. Okay, take a breath. So let's start with some good news. As you heard at the top of the hour, E. Jean Carroll has been paid. Woohoo! No, not the 85 million. No, not the 85 million, because remember, he defamed her. She took him to court. She got the $5 million judgment, and then he continued to defame her even after the court case. And she and her lawyer went back into court and got another 80-some million. That one, the big payday, is still out there, but the $5 million that has been held in escrow, which has earned $800,000 in interest. Woohoo! E. Jean Carroll got it. Federal court judge released the money. Donald Trump was trying to say that, until I've, appealed every which direction I can, she shouldn't get the money. But you know what? The judge said, if there have been 1 million appeals, and if you file 1 million more and one of them is found to be successful, we can always take the money back. Ha, ha. So, yay. She was awarded this money 3 years ago. But he's been appealing and appealing and stalling and stalling and appealing and stalling. In other words, he's been doing what he always does. But he wanted the Supreme Court to hear this case and give him back control of that $5 million. And the Supreme Court was like, no, we're not going to hear that one. No, thank you. Which meant that the lower court ruling stood, and the lower court ruling was, dude, you got to pay her. I mean, you knew when she was awarded that judgment, you knew this was exactly what he would do, that he would stall and stall and stall and appeal and appeal and appeal, because that's been what he's done. That's his whole history. That's why when he builds a building without union labor and then they try to collect, he's like, no, I'm not going to pay you. And I'll take you to court. And I'll take you to court until you've spent more money in court than you ever would have earned on this job. So you know what? Let's just call it, I'll pay you like 5 cents on the dollar and you just walk away with what you've got. And most of the time, that's exactly what people did. The prospect, even if you are in the right, it is very expensive to go to court. And if somebody like Donald Trump, who knows every trick in the book and will appeal and delay and appeal and delay and appeal and delay, for a person trying to fight that, that just means more lawyer bills, more lawyer bills, more lawyer bills, till it really does get to the point where there's more money being spent on lawyers than you ever would have gotten if he'd have paid his bill. So, yay. Yay for E. Jean Carroll. Now let's start working on that 80 million. What do you say? Congratulations, E. Jean Carroll, and her very, very, very talented lawyer who has done a masterful job. Roberta Kaplan. Jill Wine-Banks, last time I had her on, said that Roberta Kaplan was a tremendously talented lawyer. And I trust Jill's judgment. Okay, what else is going on? Oh, I know. Let's talk about Iran. Oh, God. Remember yesterday? Donald Trump said he was going to charge a 20% fee on ships that went through the Strait of Hormuz. I'm not sure. Was it 20% of the value of the cargo? Was it 20% of, I don't know, the gas that the cargo ship used? Well, today that's off again. I know. You could get whiplash following this guy. So we are no longer, at least for the moment, for the moment, we are not charging the 20%. And for the moment, we have 50 minutes till the U.S. blockade of the strait goes into effect. 3 p.m. today, the United States is going to blockade the strait. The strait that was open with no tolls or fees before Donald Trump started this mess that he can't get out of. By the way, we're back at war. Yeah, military action on their part, military action on our part. And Donald Trump doesn't seem to really be focused on that, though. He's telling anybody who will listen, this national press conference or address, maybe it's not a press conference, he probably won't take questions, his address for Thursday night, it's going to be big, it's going to be big. Is it going to be about Iran? No, no. Is it going to be about NATO? Not that we've learned. It's going to be shocking, staggering evidence that he's going to present that there was foreign interference in the 2020 election. There is some speculation. There is some speculation that he or someone, let's just say, possibly has convinced Maduro, the president of Venezuela, who we kidnapped and took into custody, that maybe as part of a deal to get released, Maduro is going to say that Venezuela interfered in the 2020 election. Because as we all know, Joe Biden didn't win freely and fairly, which is pretty ironic because we absolutely know we actually have an investigation into the 2016 election and the Russian interference that Robert Mueller found. Trump supporters were momentarily distracted because before Mueller could say anything, Mueller wasn't going to say anything publicly. He handed the report to Bill Barr, and Bill Barr came out and said, oh, yep, no problem, no interference. And Mueller was so mad that he insisted that he be allowed to do his own news conference. But by then, the damage was done, and it was too late. Bill Barr helped Donald Trump dodge a bullet. So we know there was Russian interference in 2016. But Donald Trump doesn't want to talk about that. Doesn't want to talk about that. Bill Barr said there wasn't any, so there wasn't any. Leave me alone. But 2020, how could he have lost somebody as amazingly popular, as well-loved as he is? If he lost in 2020, it had to be fixed. No, actually, dude, it didn't. It did not. The question is, who's going to carry this speech? Because he's made it clear, he's not going to make any announcements about Iran or anything else that this country really cares about. No, He is going to be talking about staggering new evidence, jaw-dropping evidence. Hey, do you suppose he's keeping that evidence in the same file where he's keeping evidence that the reflecting pool was vandalized? Doug Burgum was on CNN with Dana Bash. And are you willing to say conclusively that there was vandalism? And he was like, oh, yeah, there are pictures. Oh, yeah. And what Dana Bash should have said at that point was, if there are pictures, if there is video, if there is proof, why don't you release it? Because frankly, people are skeptical that people are telling the truth about this. What would Mr. Burgum have sent that? Oh, no, we can't do that. We can't make Doug Burgum mad. He might not come back and do another interview with me. We asked him the question, and he told us a lie. But you know what? We're not going to make him feel uncomfortable by following up on that. Okay. You've no doubt heard of that there was a deadly ICE shooting in Texas. There was a deadly ICE shooting in Maine. Let's face it. It's Tuesday, which means there's another ICE shooting. It's Monday, which means there's another ICE shooting. Except maybe there will be a pause because ICE has announced that, you know what, we're not going to stop cars anymore. Or we're not going to stop cars for the time being. Or we're not going to stop cars till after the midterm elections. How about that one? That's probably the truest of all of them. Because, you know, when we stop cars, we tend to shoot people, and they're not even the people we were after. Oh, that's funny. So, yeah, since we have this untrained and unprofessional force that has been given military-style equipment, what did you think was going to happen? I mean, you remember when ICE was recruiting in Chicago and it was like, hey, what are the requirements? Excuse me, do you have a heartbeat? Okay, you're in. That woman from a progressive activist group who went through the process just to see what would happen, they sent her a note saying that she had to fill out a bunch of forms. She didn't fill them out. A few days later, she got an email saying that she was hired. Yeah, these people are really well trained and really well screened. What did they think was going to happen? Or maybe, you know, honestly, I don't think Stephen Miller cared. Stephen Miller might even be happy about this because he is a horrible human being. Just an absolute, disgusting, horrible, no good, very bad human being. Okay. There are more and more people saying that they don't believe that that picture of Mitch McConnell and his wife. There are even Republicans who are questioning whether or not that picture was faked. Somebody pointed out that Mitch McConnell was wearing the exact same outfit and had the exact same bruise on his hand in a photo that was taken of him in 2023. And this isn't, you know, you expect, there's always conspiracy theories about everything. But if there are Republican lawmakers who are at least privately saying, we're not sure that photo was real, that's kind of getting out of the realm of conspiracy, don't you think? I don't know. If everybody can talk to Mitch McConnell for 20 minutes, why can't he talk to a reporter for 20 minutes? Does that seem odd to you? Doesn't seem odd to me. But that's just, that's something we'll have to keep an eye on. Some sad news today. The man who landed a plane on the Hudson River, Sully Sullenberger, he's now 75, and he's issued a statement saying that he has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. The Guardian U.S. has some quotes from him. For now, this means a name may not come easily to me. I forget a story I've recently told, or I don't sleep as well. But I'm in the beginning of this long journey. This new phase of my life has challenged what it means to be of service. And the answer is to speak up. It is my hope that by sharing this, other families living in the shadows with this disease will feel that they too can step forward. While there's no cure, we do now have some treatments that are believed to slow down the progress of Alzheimer's. But the fact that he is willing to go public is really meaningful, because this really is kind of a dirty little secret. Nobody wants to admit they've gotten this diagnosis, especially when there's really no cure. For those of you who don't remember or maybe too young, in 2009, he was a U.S. air pilot, and shortly after takeoff, his plane hit a flock of birds, and the birds choked and shut off both of his engines. He determined that he didn't have enough power to get back to LaGuardia, and so he landed the plane in the Hudson River. Every single person on that plane survived. Every single person. Tom Hanks did a movie about it, playing him. And Sully Sullenberger was the last person off that plane. As water was rushing in, he walked up and down the plane to make sure that nobody was still on. Every single person survived. And his bravery is continuing now. And isn't that more to admire about this man? Lindsey Graham, who is still dead, was on the Judiciary Committee. Lindsey Graham was supposed to be one of the people on that committee to look over Todd Blanche's nomination to be head of the DOJ. His death has meant that he will be replaced by another member of the Republican Party. But the time for Todd Blanche to sit before this committee, and then if he gets past the committee, to sit before the full Senate, that time is rapidly approaching. Many people believe that as Trump's former personal lawyer and apparent legal lackey, that he is not the right person to head the DOJ. When has that ever stopped Trump? Name one of his cabinet members who is the right person. And don't tell me Marco Rubio, because he has drunk the Kool-Aid as much as any of them. But one group that has decided once again to go public, to try to stop, to derail the nomination of Todd Blanche as the head of the Department of Justice. Todd Blanche, who Pam Bondi said, you know what? I can't answer any questions about the Epstein stuff because I delegated all of that to Todd Blanche. Todd Blanche was the one who went to a prison to talk to Ghislaine Maxwell. And shortly thereafter, she wasn't released, but she was moved to a country club prison, where apparently she gets, even at this country club prison, she gets special treatments. She doesn't eat what the rest of them eat. The head of the prison allows her to take her phone calls in the office. Yeah. She gets a puppy. Do you know she has a puppy? The Epstein survivors are very publicly speaking out that Todd Blanche has no business leading the Department of Justice. I don't know how many times these poor people can keep going public and continue to be ignored. Remember, they were present at a hearing where Pam Bondi was, and she wouldn't even turn around and look at them. If it gets to the full Senate, they plan to show up there as well. But for now, they have put together a public service announcement where they are asking that Todd Blanche's name be taken out of consideration to lead the Department of Justice. They hold him responsible for the way the release of the Epstein files have been absolutely botched. Remember, the government has till the end of the month to respond. Katie Fang and an activist group said, you know, he needs to do what he was supposed to do, what Congress said he was supposed to do at the end of December, release everything. Katie Fang's judge agreed with her. Todd Blanche at the last possible second said, oh, no, we shouldn't have to release them, and here's why. So the judge gave Katie Fang a chance to reply to that, and then by the end of the month, I think it's by the 27th, Todd Blanche has to reply to her reply. And we'll see what happens at that point. Again, judges bending over backwards to make sure that nobody has any grounds to accuse them of being anti-Trump, anti-MAGA. Anyway, I wanted to share with you, I thought this was incredibly powerful, the public service announcement. You can find it on social media that some of the Epstein survivors have put together. Listen to this.
My name was released.
My phone number was released.
Where I went to school.
Where I live.
My students can now search me and read about my abuse.
I am an Epstein survivor.
I am an Epstein survivor.
I am an Epstein survivor.
We were exposed.
Nude pictures of victims were released.
Our family's safety was put at risk.
Now, Todd Blanche wants to be the Attorney General of the United States.
Todd Blanche had a duty to protect us.
Instead, he protected the people who committed crimes against us. 30 years.
1,200 victims.
And 6 million files.
A mountain of evidence.
But Todd Blanche says there are no investigative leads.
Todd Blanche failed us.
He failed victims everywhere.
We deserve better.
Our country deserves better.
Vote no on Todd Blanche for Attorney General.
Vote no.
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 No. Vote no on Todd Blanche for Attorney General.
I couldn't say it any better myself. 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. Text me, call me. We're going to take a break and be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
773-763-9278. You can text me on that line. You can call me on that line. And I got this text from somebody who, here we go. Sometimes the texts get a little confusing for me. Somebody texted in, Joan, like, please tell me that in the E. Jean Carroll case that Donald Trump had to personally pay his legal fees and that the taxpayers were not paying it. Well, my guess, if I had to guess, and I'm guessing, my guess is that there were no legal fees. Why not? Who was his lawyer in the E. Jean Carroll case? Todd Blanche. Todd Blanche was a partner at a law firm. And that's a pretty big deal if you're a partner at a law firm. But this law firm wasn't really interested in representing Donald Trump. Shocker. Todd Blanche walked away from his partnership, walked away from it, moved his family to Florida so that he could go to work for Donald Trump full time. He rolled the dice. He's going to find out, like Rudy Giuliani found out, like so many others have found out, that there is a price to be paid for that. As far as the E. Jean Carroll case, it wouldn't surprise me at all that Todd Blanche didn't charge him, that Todd Blanche did that pro bono. I mean, come on, Todd Blanche has been rewarded with an appointment at the Department of Justice. At first he was the second in command, then he was the interim leader, and now he's been nominated to be the official head of the DOJ. I'd say Todd Blanche got what he wanted. Yep. Because look at where he is. Look at where he is. And, you know, Donald Trump doesn't like to pay lawyers. And Todd Blanche has to be smart enough to know that his payment is the DOJ. Okay, let's go to the phone lines. Our good friend Dave is on the line from Hoffman Estates. Hey, Dave, how are you?
Hey, Joan. I'm going to touch base for one or two things you had yesterday, but the last one is for today is going to be a sweet one. With that, yesterday you were talking about, like, with the gas prices and stuff, about the height. Well, yeah, it hurts on that, but if you noticed, the diesel price never went down, even when the prices came down. And
I'm shocked. I'm shocked, Dave. Are you kidding me?
But, I mean, everything is trucked. Farmers have to have the diesel for their tractors and stuff like that to get the feed and whatnot, and the long road haulers and stuff like that. So that's why, costs are still up on everything else,
Yeah,
but,
and as long as they can get away with it, those costs will stay high. They really will. Remember during COVID when we had all those supply chain issues and the price of, like, breakfast cereal went up a lot?
Yeah.
After the supply chain started moving again, guess what? Breakfast cereal did not go back to what it had been before. I believe there was a former vice president for Kellogg's who testified before, I don't know if it was before Congress or whether he was being interviewed, but he said, our profits went through the roof. And as long as nobody was going to pressure us or hold our feet to the fire, we were going to keep the prices high for as long as we could get away with it. And it was reported over and over again, even during COVID, when supposedly there were all these supply chain issues that were hurting everybody. Companies that supply groceries to the grocery stores were putting out record profits even during COVID.
Yeah.
So, yeah, sure.
And that infamous picture, that AI picture, because that very same picture, they had it side by side, and the other one, it was the background was a pool. Him and the wife. Everything else was the same. The shirts, the head cocking, that they had, and the only difference, the one is a hospital bed, the other was a pool. So that, and...
Well, Mitch McConnell could bring all this speculation to an end in 5 minutes by reaching out to his favorite reporter and doing a recorded interview. But
and like somebody pointed out, if he really is lucid and talking, how come he hadn't asked about his friend Lindsey Graham?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, and then with Trump sticking his finger in South Carolina politics, why have a governor anymore?
Really.
And then I'll leave. Now, this is a sweet one now. Either Paul can get it for you or something, but I happened to be looking. I wanted to say, as we watch Rachel Maddow on NBC, there's a rumored secret photo of Mitch McConnell smuggled out of a Kentucky rehab facility. He's all hooked up to ventilators and tubes. Like they said, if it isn't real, it sure seems to be much more realistic than the depiction than that guy in the red checkered shirt. So if you get a chance, look that one up, because you look at him, he's kind of like what you were saying the other day. He's sitting there, he's got ventilator tubes in him, he's got tubes.
Well, you know, the problem is AI has gotten so good that, honestly, when it's just a still photograph like that, we don't know if it's real or not. Yes, it's suspicious that he seems to be wearing the same clothes and has the same bruise in the exact same place as a photo from 2023. Coincidence or not? I mean, honestly, Dave, have you seen the video where Mitch McConnell is dancing to the music from Thriller? Does the zombie dance? I mean, that looks pretty real to me, too.
But if you can pull up that site, you'll see that. It's a little fuzzy, but it's him. It looks like him, and he ain't in no checkered shirt or nothing. He's laying in a bed. Almost looks like he's dead. But anyway, if you get a chance. But let me get asked so somebody else can get
Thanks,
through.
Dave.
All right, Joan. Be well.
You too. Got a text from Bob, who's in Elgin. Captain Sully is a true American hero, and vote yes to prosecute Todd Blanche. Well, you know, the judge who said that Trump's plan to get a lot of money in a quote-unquote settlement with the IRS and then agree to the fact that the IRS isn't going to audit him or his family or his friends forever, the judge said that that was self-dealing. So Donald Trump took an agency he was in charge of and had it agree to a settlement with another agency he's in charge of. And we're supposed to think that that doesn't stink to high heaven? The judge in that case said that the Florida lawyer who brought that case in front of her to defend Donald Trump, that she felt that their behavior was so egregious, she was going to report that lawyer for disciplinary action by the Florida bar. She then took her decision and shared it with the New York bar, strongly suggesting that at the very least, they should begin an investigation into Todd Blanche and decide whether or not he should get to keep his New York law license. We shall see. How many lawyers has Trump run through? How many of those lawyers over time have to face bar associations? Remember Jenna Ellis, the woman who all but cried, "If I'd only known what I know now, I never would have done what I did. Please don't take away my law license." Is ignorance a defense? I don't know. Generally, ignorance of the law is not a defense if you break the law. Let's take a break. We'll be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Monday through Thursday, we take your calls. We read your texts for the first hour of this show. That's what we are doing right now. So let us go to Andre, who's on the line from Chicago. Hey, Andre, how are you?
Hello, Joan. Good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon to you.
Good. I listened to your public service address message that you pay for the girls, but I think that whoever designed it for them should have incorporated what you mentioned about the Bar Association, and Trump should have been mentioning those things. And not only should they have been petitioning people not to confirm him, but they should have also, in the message, petitioned the Bar Association to disbar him. I think that would have boded well. And Trump, too, when we have the opportunities for public broadcast, we need to incorporate everything. And that lady who voted for Trump, who was one of those victims, should have been in there too. Because remember, one of the ladies said that I voted for Trump. And he still, what's his name, Todd Blanche still didn't even acknowledge them. So there's some things that could have been incorporated. It's a good public service address, but I just feel like it could have been tweaked, that it could have been better. The other thing, Joan, that I'm noticing about something, you know, we got the midterms coming up and then the election after that. And you already know Trump is trying to deal with this mail-in ballots. So I think we need our elected officials, our Democratic elected officials, we need to petition them right now to look into the delivery practices of the post office, because it's taken 7 days for a package to get from Bedford Park, Illinois, over into Chicago. It's taken 7 days for a package in Bedford Park to get out to Poston, Illinois. It's taken 7 days for a package in Bedford Park to get on the north side. This is ridiculous. And if they're doing it now, well, who's to say they won't try to delay these things during the upcoming elections with these mail-in ballots? So we need to get our officials right now to look into the delivery practice of the post office right now and not take it for granted and not just wait up until, the election time to start paying attention to these things. They need to deal with this right now with lightning speed, because these people, Trump, when I say these people, I'm talking about Trump and his cohorts, are trying everything they can to steal these elections. And now that Mitch McConnell is sick and that Lindsey Graham has left us, they're really desperate now. They turned it up a notch. They're really desperate now to try and do this thing. And I agree with somebody else, too. That picture of Mitch McConnell, I don't think it's a current photo. And look at his wife. Look at the child. Look how she looks, smiling on her face, and he's smiling. No, they don't look like nobody who just experienced anything. Yeah.
Andre, thanks for that comment on the call. One of our texters agrees. Susan, who is on the road in the North Shore, she texted in, I'll believe that McConnell is alive and kicking when they do a real-time FaceTime call with no pre-screened questions. That way it can't be faked with AI. Until then, I don't believe it. Not a sentiment that is rare at this point in time, based on all of the shenanigans we've seen from this Republican Party. Let's go back to the phone lines. Jim is on the line from Chicago. Hey, Jim.
Hi, Joan. Representative Ro Khanna had just a hair-raising experience in Palestine this week. He went to visit a little village. The school was torn apart by the Israeli settlers. He was surrounded by Israeli settlers with machine guns, the latest edition of our machine guns to the United States, he pointed out. 90 minutes he's there. They finally called the Israeli police, and they were just as arrogant as the settlers, so he was running for his life. He'll be on Democracy Now! Again tonight. And if I could comment on Venezuela for a minute. They're calling Rubio the viceroy of Venezuela. He's controlling all the money going in and out of the place. And listen to this, Doug Bergman, that nut, why don't they ask him, what about his gold mining expedition in Venezuela? Doesn't he have enough money? These people are, I've never seen, these make robber barons in the 20s look like Boy Scouts.
Yep.
They want billions upon billions of dollars. That's what he's called. And I'm sure he'd be the viceroy of Cuba, but Cuba doesn't have that kind of valuable commodities in it. They have sugar and a few other things. They don't have gold. And
I read something recently, Marco Rubio, like you say, Marco Rubio is basically ruling Venezuela. And somebody said, people used to say, well, Marco Rubio's the adult in the room. He was the only one with real experience. And people are now saying, don't believe it for a second. He has drunk the Kool-Aid like J.D. Vance, like all the rest of them. He is all in on Trump. It's just...
that's true, Joe, but they're all in for the gold. They're all in for money. They don't have any regard for the human, for the American citizen anymore. It's strictly gouge as much money as you can. Professor Allston said, listen, the whole thing is who's lining their pockets and how fast are they lining their pockets. Doug Bergen, how about a gold? He needs a gold mine like he needs a hole in that. He's got enough dough. He's already a billionaire. These people are. I thought they were public
shameless.
servants.
Yep. Amoral. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, Joe, we're sending, I mean, think about it. The ones we send to jail are chicken thieves compared to these people. Chicken thieves. But, those machine guns, what he pointed out was they're paid by our tax dollars. Those Israeli settlers are getting those machine guns, brand new machine guns off the truck, and we're paying for them. We're paying for it. And they destroyed the little village that was there. They destroyed the little school that was there. They think that they own Palestine. Somebody convinced them that they own Palestine. And how they could get that thought in their mind is beyond me. But they think they own the place. Anyway, you'll be on to Democracy Now! I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah.
Anyway, Joe, this is a total mess.
Yes, it is.
Insane. What is Trump going to talk about on Thursday night? We're going to expect a speech about a 2020 election.
Biden didn't really win.
I know, but this guy is absolutely insane. Biden won by the biggest margin in American history. That was the biggest Democratic vote in history. 81 million people voted for Biden.
Yep, but he can't bear the thought of having lost in any venue at any time, anywhere, about anything.
Yeah, tough. He's on his way to boot hell sooner or later. But this is, I don't know how long we could take this. Anyway, Joe, thanks for taking my call.
Thank you, Jim. And, yesterday I had a clip that I didn't get to. Rahm Emanuel spoke at Tel Aviv University and said some things that differed greatly with the policy we have had with Israel in the past. And it's been a speech that's gotten a lot of attention along the lines of what Jim is talking about. Paul, do you have that clip from Rahm Emanuel from yesterday? Let's share that right now.
Ambassador, you are just back from a trip overseas. Your family, I know, has deep ties to Israel. You worked during the Clinton administration, the Obama administration on important Mideast issues. In this speech you just delivered, you were very critical of Palestinian Authority's leadership failures. You faulted Arab states for not doing more in a credible way for the Palestinian people. And then you took aim at Prime Minister Netanyahu, saying he has led his country into a dead end. What do you hope you accomplished?
Well, it was not just a criticism. All those are clear, and I was stated that. I also said the United States made mistakes in the past. But I laid out a plan that gets out of Israel being a pariah. It's went from a technological prowess to a territorial pariah. And for a small nation, that's not survivable. In 22 years, it will be 100 years old. You cannot survive like this. So one, not a two-state solution, a 23-state solution, taking the Arab League's offer to recognize the state of Israel, all 21 nations, if they come to an agreement on security for the state of Israel, which is essential, and Palestinian sovereignty. That's Israel's best day and Iran's worst day. Second, building off the India, Mideast, European economic corridor, which would be the most important trade route, and put Israel's technological prowess at the center, break into the economic integration that's happening. So that was a plan. Others can offer theirs, but to me it addresses the single most important thing for the future of this alliance, that you cannot reduce your national security apparatus with military power, economic statecraft, political persuasion, and cultural attraction. Reduce three of them and let them atrophy, and your entire national security apparatus is only military power. And that's an example of how Israel has a breakout. That is good for alliance. The United States is strong with NATO. You can see that in public opinion. United States public opinion is also strong with our Asian allies. This is the only ally that is in the low 20s in support. That is not a sustainable path for an alliance that's essential for Israel, America, security.
Surveys show that because of the way they have behaved in the effort to eliminate Hamas and Hezbollah, the younger generations in our country have the worst opinion of Israel that any of us have ever seen in our lifetime. We've always been big supporters of Israel, and the younger generation sees a very different country than we grew up with. Carl from Kankakee texted in to remember that we need to keep our eyes on the prize. It's all about November. I agree with you, Carl, and we will make sure that we don't lose focus. Let's go back to the phone lines. Paul's on the line from Seattle. Hey, Paul, how are you?
Hi, Joan. Donald Trump's going to make this speech on Thursday night about how the 2020 presidential election was stolen or whatever. I think really the Democrats have missed an opportunity to educate the public on how the president is elected. So in other words, if Donald Trump wants to say there's voter fraud going on in the states, we have to educate the public but that's kind of irrelevant because that's not how the president is elected. This president is elected by the electors, the Electoral College. And so we could have this because it's the Democrats who are trying to pass the popular vote amendment, or where the states can, what's that called? I can't remember what it's called. The Popular Vote Act. Or whatever.
I can never remember the name either. But enough states have signed onto it to get us close, but we're still short.
We're almost there for that. But also a right to vote constitutional amendment. This is also on the Democrats' agenda. But the Democrats are failing to convey and teach and educate the American public that what the Supreme Court ruled in 2000 is you really don't have a right to vote for president. So it doesn't really matter. When we go to vote for president, it's kind of a straw poll in your state. It informs the electors, but the electors don't really have to do what you say. So Donald Trump, they don't. It's only by state law. So what the Democrats could be saying, and we want to make it so that your vote actually really does count.
How about it?
We could have. They could have been educating the public for the last 6 years to make Donald Trump's complaint just so that everybody by now would be going, yeah. And everybody would, including people in red states who would be the most outraged if they really understood that their vote doesn't really count. If not, you are not voting for president. The electors are. And I think people in red states would be more upset by that, to that realization. And that this whole argument, what Donald Trump did, in terms is that if there's voter fraud in the states, it's up to the states to deal with those people who committed it. But what Donald Trump tried to do was disrupt the certification of the vote of the electors. He never really had any complaint about how the electors elected, right? On the the Wednesday after the second Monday in December, there was never any allegation there was any fraud in that election. Yet that's the election that he tried to disrupt the certification by saying that. So he hasn't. We haven't educated the people that. Well, that doesn't matter if there were dead people voted or whatever happened in the states. That's up for the state legislatures and the state courts to deal with, and say, But we agree that, you don't have a right to vote, and that's what we want to make happen for you by having a Popular Vote Act and a right to vote amendment to the Constitution, that you do have a right to vote for president and get rid of the Electoral College. I mean, people hear that, but even if they went to read the Constitution, as I did many, many years ago, I'm looking for Electoral College, and it doesn't say Electoral College. I'm thinking, what is this all about? Because it doesn't say that in so many words. And you're like, I read right past it, and because I'm, like many people have that experience. They read the Constitution, and they're reading right past the words that are answering the question that they have, because you're looking for the word Electoral College, or you're looking for the words birthright citizenship. You won't find it. We're looking for the wrong word. We're looking for words that we use in popular parlance, but we won't find them. And the Democrats have failed to, they've missed this opportunity to both educate the people and in a way that it was in our interest to say, yeah, I mean, we want to have a right to vote so that your vote really does count. Let's do that. And then just kind of render Donald Trump's complaint irrelevant.
Sounds like a plan. You're going to put it into action?
Well, I do. I try to, but I mean, I'm a little nobody voice, and what happens is I talk about this, and people in general seem to think that the Constitution is just too wonky, and Democrats don't seem to really address it as if I don't know. They just say that as if it's not important. The Constitution is too wonky, and they don't put anything in very exciting terms. When I hear them talk,
and,
it's like, yeah, we don't
remember,
have to vote. That's right.
Not only exciting, but it can only be little snippets of probably not much more than a minute at a time because we don't have the same attention span. Paul, I've got to get to news. Thank you so much for the call. We are going to be right back after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
With me is political science professor William Muck from North Central College. How are you today, my friend?
Hey, Joan, I'm doing wonderful. It's a little toasty out there, but otherwise I'm fine.
It is roasty toasty. Toasty is like 85. But if you get into the 90s, that is roasty toasty. Those are the meteorological terms, and I would like you to speak about the weather correctly on this show.
I'm feeling it. No, when I'm outside, I was walking the dog earlier. It is roasty toasty. I'm on board.
Okay. You were walking the dogs. We didn't walk ours today because we thought it was too hot.
We got out early. That was the thing because we knew it was going to be warm, so we got out early. And even the dog does not want to be out when it's like this. It's pretty uncomfortable. Yeah. Plus, the two dogs that Ray takes out in the morning, they are both exceptionally fluffy. So the heat is particularly bad for them. Well, now that we've talked about the weather and we've talked about dogs, I guess we'll just wrap this up because, I love summer because nothing happens. There's nothing going on. And we can just talk about like our favorite books and our favorite plays. So what do you think Donald Trump's going to talk about on Thursday night? What is the big news that he is going to share about the 2020 election? I'm thinking it's hard to know for sure, but I mean, if you're, if you get on the social media, it sounds like the president is going to be bringing out stuff talking about the 2020 election. I mean, it's hard to know for sure, but he was even today suggesting as much, saying that he finally has evidence, proof that that the 2020 election was stolen. So I am guessing it's going to be something along those lines, which it makes perfect sense given his effort, before the midterm, right? You're going to put some. I maybe suggest that the two senators from Georgia are illegitimate. I'm expecting a broadside attack on democracy, and I think it's going to be pretty ugly, actually. Yeah. He has made comments that he has great, huge news about the 2020 election. Some people are speculating that somebody has gotten Maduro from Venezuela to agree to publicly claim that Venezuela interfered in the 2020 election as a way for Donald Trump to cut him loose. I don't know. But, this guy, it's always about him. We have a war going on with Iran. Yeah. We have midterm elections coming up. We have gas prices and grocery prices going through the roof. And he wants to take prime time to renegotiate, reevaluate the 2020 election. I mean, some people were pointing out that when he was on Fox to talk about the death of Lindsey Graham, he said a few sentences like, Lindsey, he's great. And then he segued into all of his typical stuff. I'm about victimization, about this, about that. And from the article I read, since I refused to watch Fox, they said that the Fox host
tried very hard to get him back on track about, but Lindsey Graham, and he just ignored that request and continued to talk about, I don't understand how the most powerful man in the world is also the world's biggest victim. But, and he's just, it's all about him. It is all about him. So with everything going on in the world, what does he want to talk about? He wants to relitigate the 2020 election. Well, how did we get this weirdo?
It's such a great question, right? And it shows, I mean, obviously he's got these narcissistic, I'd say tendencies, but it's even more than that. It's sort of personality defining, but it's also what happens when you don't surround a president with anybody who's willing to say no, right? Or any adults in the room. There's no real conversation. I mean, this is sort of like a Mad King situation where nobody wants to challenge him. Nobody wants to say, Mr. President, that's a bad idea. Or Mr. President, here's some talking points. I mean, that's a really, really important dynamic to any presidency, that you've got people around them willing to ask hard questions, to bring up, but that's gone, right? And there maybe was a little bit of that in the first the first term, but now it's him unleashed, and we see what happens. It means that our country is pulled in every wild direction each day, depending on what odd conspiracy theories in his head. It's such a waste of our time, and there's real things that need to happen. There's real governance that needs to be done, but we don't do any of that because we just have to play the silly Mad King game.
Yeah. Okay. You might as well weigh in on this because everybody else is. Was that AI? Is Mitch McConnell really on life support in a rehab facility somewhere? He was wearing the same clothes that he wore in 2023, and he had the same bruise on his hand, and I told somebody who hadn't seen it, I said, and Mitch McConnell's holding a newspaper, like they do in hostage situations where they're trying to ransom somebody to show proof of life. Ugh.
It's so bizarre. I'm of the opinion, I don't have any inside knowledge, but I'm going to accept that Mitch is still alive, that he's probably in really poor health in the hospital, that those things all seem reasonable. But your point about the conspiracy theories is so fascinating because it used to be, you go back 20 years, there were people who engaged in conspiratorial thinking, but they were really on the margins. You had to kind of look for them. Now they're everywhere. I mean, Donald Trump has made that, and it used to, initially he was using it to target Democrats, but now it's everywhere. Now, the sort of this conspiratorial thinking is eating the Republican Party and eating Republican candidates. It's really madness. And I will say, I'm still on Twitter. I know I shouldn't be, but the treatment that Mitch McConnell has gotten on, with all of this stuff on Twitter is pretty fantastic. It's been pretty funny.
Yeah, I'm not on Twitter. But there's a woman on Instagram who every day gives us all of the Mitch McConnell jokes. And now she's actually expanded it because there are apparently a bunch of Lindsey Graham jokes as well. And, it's certainly out there. We need to take a break. I want to talk to you about what is going on in the United Kingdom. When I first saw this picture, I thought it was like The Onion. I thought it was like a joke. But there's a man with a trash can on his head who is apparently running against Nigel Farage. I don't know. We got to talk about this. You got to explain this to me. William Muck and I are taking a break. We'll be back with more after this.
Don't turn that dial.
A dangerous mistake to make.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now on WCPT 820.
With me is political science professor William Muck from North Central College. I peruse a lot of news before I go on the air, and I saw this picture of a man who appears to have a garbage can on his head. And I saw that and I was like, I'm not going to spend any time reading that. That's obviously just some sort of comic article, some sort of satire. But apparently it is not. There is someone who goes by the name of Count Bin Face, who is running against Nigel Farage, who I really don't like. So I don't know. Maybe this is some kind of karma if he's defeated by a garbage can. Explain what is going on and who is this Bin Face guy?
This is my favorite story in politics right now, Joan. It is absolutely fantastic. Count Binface we should all be Googling him and going on YouTube and watching videos of him. He's been around a while. He's the satirical British candidate. He's run multiple different times. He's actually, it's a comic who sort of created this character. But what happened is Nigel Farage was under investigation for taking funds. So there's been this long-standing investigation going of, sort of trace the funds that he took, and there's allegations that it's corrupt. And so what he did, Nigel Farage, is he resigned from his seat in Parliament, and he thought he was going to be really slick in doing this because the minute that he resigns, the investigation has to stop. And so he said, I'm going to resign, which will require a by-election. So that basically another election, at which point he will run for that election, but it means the investigation has to stop. And he lives in a safe conservative district, so there's no question that he would likely get reelected. So, total sort of shyster move here. But what happened is all the other major parties in the region decided, or in that little area said, we're not going to run a candidate. Nigel, if you're going to pull this trick, you're going to run against yourself, except for Binface, who you absolutely described correctly. He describes himself as an intergalactic space warrior. He wears a trash bin shaped helmet. So the listeners should go on and Google this just so they can see it. But what's wonderful is he actually takes this somewhat seriously in a satirical way. He's got actual positions, one of which is that if he's elected, he will build one affordable house. He has a whole policy about he doesn't want to raise the price on kebabs in his neighborhood. And anybody who's riding a bike who's convicted of a crime will have to transition to a unicycle, right? So it's absolutely absurd, but it's so fantastic that Nigel Farage now has to run against Binface, right? So Nigel Farage thought he was going to be smart and clever and play around the rules, and now he finds himself in a campaign against Binface where some of the polling shows Binface ahead. Joan, it's absolutely wonderful.
Oh my goodness, you're kidding me.
It's early, right? And I think some of it is just protest votes. I think Nigel Farage is likely to still get elected. But the fact is, let's say he wins, but he wins narrowly over a guy who's wearing a trash can on his head. I mean, it's embarrassing for Farage. It exposes him for the sort of corruption that he's doing. He was hoping that he could turn this into like he's going to run on immigrants and the far right populism. And now he has to run against this sort of satirical character. And again, this is what's fun about democracy when politicians try to manipulate it and the democracy pushes back. Joan, it's just fantastic.
Well, a lot of the other elected officials in the UK have really come out against Farage for pulling this stunt to basically get himself out of an investigation. You say he represents a very conservative district, but even people who are right-wing don't really like to see this kind of blatant, maybe if he could have finessed it, but this kind of blatant, I'm doing this to get out of this election. I'm wondering if just in protest of what he has done, they wouldn't vote for the absurd candidate. I mean, the way CNN described this, a political gamble looks like it has spectacularly backfired.
Yes.
So they're taking Binface pretty seriously.
Yeah, and if the listeners could go out and see some of his interviews, he's really funny. He's clever. He sort of leans into the character and the humor and all of that. And it's great, right? And you're absolutely right that this potentially could backfire on him. It's raising all the issues of corruption again. He's got to answer those questions. And you're right. Sometimes you hope that this can sort of lead to a broader movement where people say, enough of this, enough of, manipulation, enough with the, going around the rules. And hopefully, people will see this for what it is and and vote Binface. Now, there is some real questions because the Parliament has rules that you can't wear sort of any headgear into the Parliament. So that would have to be an issue, right? So we'll have to see if Binface does win. But at a deeper level, I love the way in which he's sort of poking fun at the system and poking fun at Farage. And I'm a big believer that humor and mockery is one of the best tools for striking back against dangerous politicians, authoritarians. This works really well. Some of the most cutting criticism of Trump has been humor-based. So I love all of this, and I think it's a really, really smart way to go.
Well, he this is not like his identity is super secret. I'm thinking of some of the famous DJs who wore different outfits and robots and this and that, and they never wanted their identity known. It was a big secret, but everybody seems to understand that this is a guy by the name of John Harvey. He writes scripts. He's a comedian, and if he does win, I'm sure he'd be pleased to take off the trash can and take the seat. Yes. According again to CNN reporting, this guy, Binface, a.k.a. John Harvey, is now the center of British media attention. And some of the people are saying, like you said, this guy might have a shot at unseating Farage. Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be awesome?
Yes. And even if he doesn't win, one hopes that this whole episode sort of shrinks Nigel Farage's ego, his political power. I mean, it's one of the things we're looking at in Europe right now is that a lot of these far-right parties are doing well. In France, Marine Le Pen and her party is in a real strong position.
Yeah, I was reading about her. She was supposed to be barred from running in elections for a pretty long period of time, and then the courts changed that and said, oh, basically, sort of like time served. You want to run again in the future? Okay. So yeah, it does seem like, Giorgia Meloni in Italy is pretty far right. I mean, she was considered the European leader who was most appreciative of and supportive of Trump, though that relationship has soured. There's a shock.
Right. And the interesting thing about all of this is that the far-right candidates, especially in Europe, but also in the United States, they do well in campaigns because they move with this sort of populist message, which is simple solutions to complex problems. They blame immigrants. I mean, it's a story we've seen over and over and over again, and it's successful in getting elected, but they're not very good at governing, right? And that's what we've seen out of the Trump administration. They're not very effective. Meloni is one of the few who I think has governed a bit more centrist. I think certainly they've leaned into some of the sort of culture war stuff, but on day-to-day issues, she's been a little bit more pragmatic than some of the other right-wing populists. And I think the other interesting thing is she's actually pushed back against Trump. So there's this divide within the far-right movement where a lot of the far-right in Europe is like, we don't want anything to do with Trump. So, I mean, all of it is, I think it's a dangerous political movement, but I think it has the seeds of its own political destruction as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, we will keep. When is this election? So we know whether or not when Binface is going to win or not win. But, even if Farage wins, do you think he cares that he has been so rebuked and so humiliated by having to run against a guy wearing a trash can? Or do you think he's like Trump and he really has no shame?
I don't think he has much shame, but even like Trump, who doesn't have shame, these little things just eat him apart, right? I mean, you think about, as where we started, Trump is just obsessed about the 2020 election. So these little issues, especially the far right populist men, they tend to struggle with this stuff. So I think it's going to eat him a little bit. I think it's going to impact his broader perspective. So I think I think he's likely to kind of retain the seat, but I think it's going to ding him a little bit. I'm not sure exactly when the election is. I don't know if they've announced an official date yet, but again, I'm all in on this. I am watching Binface as close as possible.
In case I miss it, when this election comes around, please shoot me an email so I can make sure I include it in my morning update, my morning survey of all the news of the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is 3:23, and was reported this morning that at 3 o'clock Central Time was when the United States would resume its blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. It hasn't been there for a while, but it's back now. Apparently, we're back at war, and we've decided that we can stop ships going through the strait just like Iran can. Nanny, nanny, nanny. And there was going to be a fee for ships going through that they had to pay in the United States. But in 24 hours, we've decided to take that fee away. Trump's policy, his positions, on the whole situation in Iran. I've never seen a situation this serious where the United States policy toward it changes hour by hour. Yeah. We're going to do this. No, actually, we're not going to do this. We're going to do this. Okay. No, we're not going to do that. And I know now that behind the scenes, countries like Saudi Arabia are having more influence with Trump. You know, when he wanted to do that Operation Freedom, and Saudi Arabia basically said, no, you can't do it with the air bases you have in our country. And no, we're not letting anybody leave or anything else. And then all of a sudden, 24 hours later, Operation Freedom was off the table. Do you think some of his, we're going to do this, no, we're not going to do that, is because some of our quote unquote allies in the region are starting to dictate to him what he will and won't do?
I think they're being more vocal about it, especially the Gulf states, right? I think they finally realize that they have to express their voice because it is hitting them in a very, very direct way, economically, militarily. I mean, this has been so botched. It's hard to sort of capture what a catastrophe this all has been. Remember when Trump first launched this war, it was all about nuclear weapons, right? It was the idea that we have to focus on Iran's nuclear program and prevent them from developing a nuclear weapon, even though our own intelligence said they weren't currently doing that. And now all of that conversation has gone away. It's no longer about Iran's nuclear program. It's all about the Strait of Hormuz, right? That has become the only issue that has to be addressed because it is such a global catastrophe. So, yeah, and I think what's happened is those Gulf states have now realized that they have to put direct pressure, and specifically Saudi Arabia, because they actually have some influence in able to do so. Yeah, I think they've realized that if they don't start pressuring the president, this could unravel in really dangerous ways where they are suddenly pulled into a conflict. So this stands out as one of the most bungled foreign policy decisions in the last 75 years. It's just absolutely silliness.
I was reading, I think it was yesterday, that, one of the big concerns since the whole thing started was that it would expand, that because we couldn't win, we would keep upping the ante and then not winning and then upping the ante again. I believe it was yesterday I read that it is possible now that Saudi Arabia is in conflict with the Houthis in Yemen. And that was also framed as, the violence in the region is expanding. Do you think we're coming up on a break. So let me just ask you this question. You can write it down because when we come back from the break, I probably won't remember it. But, one of the people that I read is the University of Chicago, Professor Robert Pape, who has, of course, been a big security advisor to several administrations. And he has been saying all along, that the balance of power has shifted to Iran. They're the ones now who are the most powerful over us in the region. And also, he's been predicting all along that this whole thing would expand, whether it expands to being troops on the ground or expands in some other way, because he calls it the escalation trap. You do something, it doesn't get you where you want to go. So you do something else, and then you do something else, and then you do something else, and then you're in up to your neck. I want to talk to you about both of those things when we come right back after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
With me is political science professor William Muck from North Central College. I asked him some questions about what's going on in Iran, the possible escalation that could be coming. William, I'm sorry I asked you a question and then we had to go to a break, but please, jump right in here.
Yeah, I keep thinking about off ramps, right? So we're in it's in a bad place right now. How can the president get the United States out of this sort of stalemate, quagmire, whatever you want to call it? And I don't see easy off-ramps anymore, right? Initially, the idea was that they were going to show power, right? The United States will dominate Iran militarily, and then Iran will simply concede, right? They will have unconditional surrender. And we learned very quickly that that wasn't the case. That Iran actually, even though they couldn't necessarily win the war, they also wouldn't lose it, right? They could survive. And survival for them, the regime surviving, was victory. And so that meant that these military options were less effective for the Trump administration. So ultimately what they do is they say, hey, what Obama did was actually a really good idea. Let's go back to the negotiating table. But they're not very good at that, right? What they realized is that they don't have the people who understand Iran, the complexities of all of it. This Strait of Hormuz issue that's popped up this last week is largely because the administration didn't have people knowledgeable enough to write a memorandum of understanding that captured all of these details. Basically, for the Strait of Hormuz, there are 3 different channels. And the agreement basically says that Iran agrees that they will try to facilitate the opening of the Strait of Hormuz. That's not the exact language, but essentially that. And Iran is saying, sure enough, we will absolutely do that, but everybody has to go through the channel that's closest to Iran, not the central channel or not the one closest to Oman. And technically, that you could see that as being consistent with the Memorandum of Understanding. Now, that's not what the United States thought it was doing, but largely that's because the United States had so much ambiguity in that agreement. So how do you get out of this situation now? And I don't think there are easy pathways out. So I think Professor Pape is spot on here to say that this is likely to continue as a low-grade conflict. The United States is likely to have to increase its military presence in the region. Yesterday, Trump is saying that we're going to have to control the Strait of Hormuz. Well, that's going to require more of a military presence. At some point, they may make a decision to use ground troops. Like, all of these things are options. And the reason they're the only options left is because they've exhausted all the other options. So it's mismanagement and ignorance at its worst.
It seems like Donald Trump, remember in his first term toward the end of it, when he decided that he was actually smarter than all of the generals?
Right.
Yeah, I really believe that Netanyahu played him like a fiddle, that Netanyahu, who we've all come to know, pitched this idea to Obama, pitched it to Biden, pitched it to Bush. Nobody would join him in his war on Iran until Donald Trump. And I think Donald Trump was full of himself because of the successful kidnapping of Maduro and his wife. And I think Benjamin Netanyahu was like, dude, this is going to be like one and done. We'll get in there, we'll bomb. You've already seen there have been thousands of people protesting in the streets. We'll take out the leadership. The people will rise up and take control of the government, and you will be a hero. You will be, my friend, on your way to that Nobel Peace Prize. And I believe that the Joint Chiefs said to him, there's a very strong possibility that Iran will close the Strait of Hormuz because everyone except Trump has been saying that, has been seeing that. I talked to one person who used to be part of the military and used to participate in these different war games. And he said, we did multiple war games about a conflict with Iran. And each and every time we did it, made the moves, within 5 minutes, the Strait of Hormuz was closed. It never was open. There was no war game scenario where we were able to have this kind of conflict and the strait stay open. I think Netanyahu played him. I think Donald Trump realizes it now, but now he's stuck. And Trump, rather than admit a mistake, he's going to double down. And I think that's what he's doing.
That's right. Because honestly, if they wanted to get out of this and they wanted to really lean into the negotiations, into the diplomatic front, I think Iran would go for that. Now, we're in a much weaker strategic position now because, as you noted, now Iran is essentially in control of the Strait of Hormuz, but you could still negotiate your way out. But it would require Trump to swallow a very bitter political pill. And I don't think he wants to do that. He can never admit
I don't think
that
he's
he was
capable
wrong.
of doing that.
Exactly, right. So, but then the implication of that is his ego means there's no real pathway out of this short of him continuing to show strength, right? Over the weekend, they had all the team out talking about that the United States was going to demonstrate strength and power would resolve this. And it's so naive to think that you can bomb a few more facilities and Iran is suddenly going to concede. No, I mean, they have no interest in doing so. They have found a point of leverage that they could never have dreamed of before this war in the control of the Strait of Hormuz. In some ways, they don't even need to think about developing a nuclear weapon because they have so much control over the global economy right now. I mean, it's been bad decision on top of bad decision. And then the personality and the narcissism of Trump means that he can't find a way out because he'd have to admit that he was wrong.
And I think that Iran, I don't know, because we've come in there as the big bully. I think whichever poor protesters are left are now going to be completely drowned out by the people who are supporting the current theological regime. Not because they really want that kind of a government, but because they don't want us dictating to them and they don't want us making that decision for them. It just seems so obvious and so logical that this would completely give the opposite effect than what we supposedly thought we wanted. I'm not a politician. I'm not a military person. I'm not a strategist. If I can see this, why the heck can't somebody in the White House see this?
Well, I think a lot of people around Trump saw that, right? I think Marco Rubio, the regime change book that just came out talked about there were these meetings, and Marco Rubio said this is, he used colorful language to say they're selling something, and the Joint Chiefs were also aware, saying like this is going to be more difficult. But to the point you made earlier, I think that's the most important one. Netanyahu told Trump, "You're going to go down in history. You're going to be the guy who topples a regime who's been in power since for 47 years. You're going to be the guy that goes down in history," and that won the day. Not the strategic logic, not the arguments, none of that. On the tail of Venezuela, he was thinking, "I'm going to be this great man," and now we're seeing how much he's humbled, and hopefully that continues to play out in terms of the midterm. But I would anticipate we're going to see gas prices go up again if we're closing down the Strait of Hormuz. We are back where we were a few weeks ago. Prices are going to be high. And the other thing to think about is U.S. military resources are also being strained. The military isn't talking about this, but every time Iran launches this wave of drones, these cheap drones, the United States needs to use very, very expensive missiles to shoot the stuff down, right? And so over time, that is very, very taxing on the military, right? Zelensky in Ukraine has been talking about wanting more Patriot missiles, and the United States kind of has to quietly say, we can't do that because, to be honest, we don't have that many because we've had to use so many in the Gulf right now. So there is a military impact on this as well.
And I think that's why Ukraine has shifted over to, you know what? Just license it to us. Give us the plans. We'll make it ourselves. We'll that's all you need. You don't have to send us the actual stuff. Just tell us exactly how to put it together and we will be okay. And, I think that is an approach that could very well succeed with Volodymyr Zelensky, because I think you're right. I mean, we're using a $5 million munition to take out a $60,000 drone. What's wrong with that picture? That is unsustainable.
And the interest, you made the talk about Vladimir Putin in Russia. I mean, Trump and Putin feel very similar in this situation where they have bitten off more than they can chew. And Putin is finding that fighting Ukraine has become increasingly difficult as these drones change the nature of warfare. And suddenly Ukraine is feeling very emboldened, and Putin is in a really, really difficult political situation. Similar with Trump, right? Where he thought, I'm going to be a great man and do all of this. And now he's finding that defeating a power that's much weaker than the United States is proving much more difficult than they anticipated. So I think both those leaders are on a similar pathway right now.
I'm talking to political science professor William Muck from North Central College. CNN is reporting they did an interview with retiring Republican Don Bacon from Nevada. And he said that Tonight's speech by Trump is going to be about free and fair elections. Everybody who I've spoken with believes that Trump is going to try to pull some kind of nonsense with the midterms. He's already sort of alleged that, in Georgia, the election results are just, they're no good. We have to cancel all the results we've seen in Georgia. He's going to try something. And if indeed he uses this speech on Thursday to show his hand a little bit about how he intends, rather than saying, I really won in 2020 and here's why, if he uses this speech to say, we don't think the elections in the midterms are going to be free and fair, so I'm announcing now we're going to be taking these actions, I think that is an incredible mistake on his part. And, we still have 3.5 months. So if he lays out a plan now to disrupt them, I think Democrats and even Republicans who think he's a Looney Tune, we have time to respond. I want to talk to you more about that and some other stuff that CNN has been reporting today about Trump and his mental state when we come right back after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Republican Don Bacon from Nevada, who is retiring, so you might think that he would feel a little less pressure to lie for Trump. He was interviewed on CNN today, and he basically said, elections take place, the vote is certified, it's a process that works, and it is a process that I believe has worked very effectively. In other words, this whole thing about Trump elections are rigged is wrong. Trump has said, tonight he wants to talk about elections, and, he may lay out a course of action that a lot of people are expecting, some sort of, to pull some sort of fast one to try to prevent the people that he knows aren't going to vote for him from voting, or the states that aren't going to vote for him from their elections being counted. There's a lot of things that could go very, very wrong. I almost hope he is going to say something along those lines, William, because we would have 3.5 months to figure it out. And also this afternoon, CNN was reporting that one of their people did an interview with Jon Ossoff, the senator from Georgia who's up for re-election. And Jon Ossoff said privately, many Republicans believe Trump has, quote unquote, lost it. Yeah. So what's he going to do? What kind of nonsense is he going to pull? And if indeed they really behind the scenes believe he's lost it, will they ever do anything to rein him in?
Not Republicans. We've been waiting a decade, Joan, for Republicans to get a spine and stand up to him. I don't think that's going to happen. But what strikes me about all of this is straight out of the authoritarian playbook, right? We've seen this over and over and over again, where leaders, as they're trying to undermine democracy, they know they can't win free and fair elections. So what they do is they bend, they break the rules, they change the system itself so that they can secure victory. And we've seen this play out in small ways before the midterms, but I think Trump realizes that this is going to be really bad, that he's probably going to lose the House, that maybe he's going to lose the Senate. That means more impeachments, more investigations, more exposing the corruption. I think he is going to unleash all varieties of anti-democratic tactics to try to win or steal this election. And what it means is that the people have to push back, right? Not Democrats and Republicans, but people in favor of democracy have to say, this isn't okay. It's not okay to roll in ice and, around voting areas. It's not okay to grab ballot boxes. Right? I think there has to be a public pushback. I think there has to be a legal pushback. The Democratic Party has to be prepared for all of these tactics. I anticipate it is not going to be a few minor things. I think he's going to be swinging for the fences. And so, yes, we all have to be prepared to have these meaningful conversations, and even if that means getting out in the streets, right? I think this is the thing I'm most worried about as we move toward the midterm and the next presidential election.
Here's what I don't understand. Most, if not all, of the elected officials I've ever interviewed while they may have good things that they want to accomplish, it seems to me their number one priority is getting reelected, because nobody can do this job like I do. You know, I'm really the best. And if I have to sacrifice a couple of principles along the way to keep my seat, well, then it's a small price to pay to keep me in office. But from everything that I'm reading, everything that I'm hearing, and everything that I believe, Republicans see disaster coming. They see disaster coming. And I understand, you know, if your primary still hasn't happened, you don't want to have Trump run somebody against you that will kick you off the ballot. But once your primary is settled and you are on the ballot and you see this blue wave that is going to knock you out of your seat, why not? You don't have to say Donald Trump is demented, but maybe here or there you could push back. You know what? Maybe we should have a war powers resolution to rein in what we're doing in Iran. Maybe we should try to figure out how to get people back on the Medicaid rolls, or how we could reinstate the subsidies so that 500,000 people don't get kicked off their health care in New York State alone. And I don't see any of this happening. Are they just like a lemming? Are they just going to keep walking to that cliff and, okay, here we go, everybody jump?
I think so, because they're afraid. I mean, the one area that Trump has been so effective is putting fear back into politics. They're all afraid of him. And what they do is they look at those handful of Republicans who've made that claim, who've pushed back, the Liz Cheneys, the Adam Kinzingers, the Mitt Romneys, that group who said, this is unacceptable, this is wrong. They have been fully ostracized. And so even in this state where Trump isn't as powerful as he was maybe a year ago, they're still terrified. I mean, we saw this play out in the primaries where when Trump puts his thumb on the scale, those candidates win. So it's fear, right? They know right from wrong. They all know that the election wasn't stolen in 2020. They all know that our elections are some of the most secure in the world, but they're afraid to say so because the Mad King is going to come after them. This feels so much like authoritarian. I spent a lot of time lately sort of thinking about Stalin and sort of the court that he held, and everybody was so afraid of the great leader, whether he was going to go after them. It feels like there are similar dynamics between the president and the Republican Party, where they're just terrified that the great leader is going to come after them.
Didn't that sort of kill the messenger, don't anybody tell me anything I don't want to hear attitude that Stalin and other dictators have had? Doesn't that eventually lead to their downfall?
Yeah, because it's a terrible way to govern, Joan, right? I mean, you think about what you want to do is you want to surround yourself with smart people who help you govern and make good public policy, but that's not what's happening here, right? This administration, and Trump in particular, he doesn't care about good governance. He cares about creating partisanship. He cares about making the others seem like the evil enemy, all of that, because that helps him stay in office. And he's willing to burn the democracy down in the process because it only reinforces his power, right? This is the classic tactic that authoritarians do. They use the tools of democracy to undermine democracy, and that's what Trump is doing. And the Republican Party is complicit in this because they could have early on stopped this or slowed it down. And the minute they fell over, he took advantage. And now they're all just so afraid of him.
What will happen to make them stop being afraid of him? Does he have to die? And I don't say that actually joking. I mean, seriously.
This is a great question, right? Because I'm assuming, and I don't think it's a given that he's not on the ballot in 2028. I know he's now saying all the right things now, but authoritarians never walk away from power because they're afraid about being targeted for all their crimes. I mean, what we're starting to see is that this Trump administration is the most corrupt presidency in the history of the country. Full stop. Nobody's close. So if he leaves power, and a Democrat wins office and you've got a Democratic Congress, there are going to be investigations. There'll be a new attorney general. He's going to be terrified of that. So I'm not certain that he's just going to simply walk away in 2028. So all of these things are so important in terms of preserving the democracy, making sure you're paying attention to this and pushing back. I mean, I am genuinely worried about the midterms and the presidential elections.
What do you think he's going to do?
I wouldn't be surprised if he declares a state of emergency, martial law, right? I wouldn't be surprised if he goes in and seizes ballot boxes. The adults in the room who would have told him this is a bad idea are all gone. Do you think his attorney general is going to say no? Do you think Pete Hegseth is going to say no, that he doesn't want to deploy the military in the U.S. streets? There is nobody around him who's going to stand up to him. So then the question is, who is willing to do that, right? I think we have to hope that the states reassert their power in the midterms and in the next presidential election, that Democratic and Republican states say, we run these elections and, we don't want the military coming in here and seizing ballot boxes. It's so important for the preservation of the democracy that states say, hey, federalism is a real system and you get your power, but we have control of these elections. So where I'm focusing is making sure that states are prepared for this. Illinois is prepared for this. Wisconsin, especially a state like Pennsylvania. I mean, if you think about where Trump is going to target, it's going to be these states, Philadelphia with black and brown communities, right? So Pennsylvania has to be up to the task. Wisconsin's got to be up to the task. Those are the really interesting things I think we should be paying attention to, is what's happening at the state level to prevent an attempt to steal the democracy.
And I can't remember for the life of me which state this is, but there was a blue state that passed a law or is considering passing a law that says that taking ballot voting information is illegal. Like, how the FBI raided in Georgia and they took all those boxes of voting materials? There is a state that is either considering or has already put a law in the books that kind of move is illegal. And I think that's the kind of thing that all the states, I read about wonderful things happening here and there. Like in Connecticut, they passed a law that if you're a federal agent, you cannot work if you have a mask on and your identity covered. A state here and a state there, they're doing great things in the legislature. One thing Republicans do, if they pass something in the state legislature and they get something by, maybe it's an anti-abortion measure or something like that, other Republican states go, yeah, and right away, that sort of thing is coming up in all the Republican legislatures. And I wish Democrats would get off their duff and start, okay, Connecticut, yes, you did a good thing. We're going to do that. Okay, this idea that it's illegal to remove election materials from any kind of Secretary of State facility. Yeah, that's a good one. We're all going to do that. Instead, it seems very piecemeal.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think there has to be coordinated efforts. States need to learn from each other and pursue those policies. I also think on the legal front, there have to be these really strategic campaigns where, you don't just have, officials or lawyers in D.C. You've got them everywhere. And you're prepared to raise those issues at the state level, at the local level. When something like this happens, you got to be ready to run this up to the Supreme Court and hope that even though this is a conservative Supreme Court that has enabled Donald Trump, that there's at least 5 justices on that court are willing to say, I'm not willing to give up on democracy yet. Because I do think that is where a lot of this is going to come down. I think it's going to be up to Amy Coney Barrett and maybe one more conservative justice, maybe John Roberts, to save the democracy in response to some sort of tactic that Donald Trump is going to deploy. I think it's almost inevitable that he's going to try something, and I think it's going to work its way to the court super quickly. So these are all you got to be playing defense and offense at all levels now.
Well, I've been reading repeatedly, the states, they know something's coming. And so they're preparing all these motions. If he does this, we've got this motion pre-written so that if he pulls something that within 12 or 24 hours, they can be in court and make a motion to try to stop it. So I have no evidence that that's actually happening, but I have read that there are Democratic, say, attorneys general who are trying to think ahead and prepare this stuff. And I hope that's true. I hope that's true.
It's so important. It's so important. That stuff has to happen immediately. And I think the other thing that has to happen is if Trump does something like that, that the people are out in the streets. There's got to be a show. It can't be sort of, like, oh, this is, another Trump thing. The people have to be out in the streets saying, fighting for the democracy, not fighting for Democrats or Republicans, saying like, no, the democracy is what we're fighting for. So yeah, when those things happen, not if, I think when is the right way to think about it. There has to be a massive response from everybody saying like, we want to keep this democracy going.
Yeah. Unfortunately, those of us in the media have a tendency to tell people, oh my God, this is the most important election of your lifetime. Because not because we're trying to hype it, but because that's the way it seems. But most of those people are now saying, no, we've said it before, but honest to God, this is the one. This is absolutely the one. This isn't just about, the person you're going to vote for or not. This is truly about voting for our form of government. And I'm really kind of worried that the media has cried wolf a little bit too often, and we didn't mean to, because it seemed like each election was more important than the one before. But this one really seems to be a make or break to me. I don't know. Maybe that's hyperbole. What do you think?
No, I agree with you. And I think about this from sort of the academic, the political science community. We've been saying the same thing, right? In different ways, but saying this is the most important election for the preservation of democracy. And I think all of those things that were said in the past were true. And, the fact that Trump won the presidency again has been bad for the democracy, right? So that was a really important election and it went the wrong direction. And this midterm is really, really important. So I don't think it's hyperbole, but I think it can be perceived that way because the political science, the academic community is terrified and again, grounding themselves in a different perspective, but saying the same thing that the media is saying.
William Muck, it is always a delight to chat with you. The time just flies. Thank you so much for sharing your day with us. Stay out of the heat, keep those dogs from overheating, and we will talk to you next time.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you so much, Joan.
Thank you. We're going to take a break for news. We'll be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I am very pleased to welcome a new voice to our airwaves. Paul Lisnek is here. You remember him. He was on Channel 9 pretty much forever. He is a Renaissance man. He's reported on politics. He's reported on theater. He is an author. He's on YouTube and Spotify. And the Museum of Broadcast Communications here in Chicago has a permanent exhibit dedicated to Paul's career in television and radio. Mr. Lisnek, welcome to our airwaves.
Joan, thank you. Well, the last time I saw you, you were getting the awards. But then again, you getting an award, we just call that a Tuesday.
Yeah. The Broadcast Museum has an exhibit. Tell me about that. That is just, usually an honor like that is only reserved for somebody who's dead, So the fact that they're doing this now for you is just amazing.
They might have been trying to send me a message. I don't know. But what it is, and right now it's actually because of the change in location of the museum. So it is actually in storage, will make its way out when the museum returns to a more permanent home. But it's a combination of videos and things tied to my career, some awards, that kind of thing. But of course, you may know that I also am a collector of memorabilia, political, film, Broadway, TV. And so I put sort of on permanent loan, I suppose, a lot of what I have. And that was part of what the exhibit was. Bob Hope's jacket from Vietnam and the floor plans for Seinfeld and all that kind of stuff. So part of it was setting up what was a really nice gallery in the old space that they're no longer in, so people could enjoy a lot of that history. Carol Burnett's scrub woman's hat, and one day Carol went to visit the museum, and they sent me a picture of her holding the scrub woman's hat at the time. So yeah, it's great fun.
How did you collect all this stuff? I mean, did you go to auctions? Did you go to estate sales? How did you get this?
It's a combination. A lot of times it's auctions, but, part of it is I've been around a while. I actually have a lot of friends who were TV stars back in the 60s. So Don Knotts from Andy Griffith, I worked with him to get the keys from the jail cell, and Kathy Garver, who was, of course, Sissy on Family Fair. She's a good friend, and she'll sometimes come up with something that was a prop from the show. So just kind of a combination of things. But I feel like I kind of grew up in the 60s and 70s. Mostly the 60s is what I remember. And so I just love collecting things from that era. I've got a telephone that was in Lucy's living room, and I Love Lucy. But in Broadway, I have Lin-Manuel Miranda's original Boots from Hamilton. So it's a combination of things. There's a show called Collector's Call. They've been here a few times to kind of do some shows about some of it from here. So it's great fun, and it's a nice break to take from politics once in a while, right?
There's so much about you that I don't think the people who've watched you on Channel 9 or heard you on the radio have realized about you. For instance, you've written not one, not two, not three, but 15 books, 2 works of political legal fiction. Talk to us about that side of your life. Paul Lisnek, the author. You make me feel like I've really been a bum for most of my life. I just want to say that right now.
You got the bigger name, Joan, is all I can tell you. So, look, I spent years as practicing law, and then I was a law school dean, and then I was a jury consultant. And during those years, I worked in cases you might have heard of, like the O.J. Simpson case, and Phil Spector, the music legend, remember him? Who ultimately was convicted of murder. Not when we were in the case. We actually got a hung jury. We worked for him. And then he fired us because he said, you got O.J. off, but you didn't get us off. And so then he hired somebody else and got convicted. But all sorts of those famous cases. So, yeah, I've written a bunch of books for lawyers and people interested in the law, one called The Hidden Jury about the jury consulting years. But it was towards the end I wanted to take a challenge at writing fiction. And so the hero in 2 of the books, Assumed Guilt and Assumed Treason, is a jury consultant. That's unusual, but that was my background. And so the first one is based on sort of political corruption in Illinois. It's fiction, Joan. It's fiction.
You had you created like a fictional scenario that would never actually take place in Illinois. I don't even know where you got an idea like that. Political corruption in Illinois.
It involved a governor who may or may not have committed murder, and I gave a copy to JB in his early days, and I told him that. I said, but I promise you I finished this book before you took office. And he kind of laughed. He goes, oh, it must have been Blago. So he was kidding. But then after that, I wrote a book called Assumed Treason, which is sort of like a 2020 Trump kind of presidential election, but it is fiction. That one won an award for best fiction mystery. So, yeah, it's been a varied career, done a lot of things, and but, life moves on, and then things change. So that's what we do. We do different things, right?
That's right. Somebody told me at the beginning of my career that just wrap your head around it. Everybody who's in broadcasting has a bad thing they have to go through. Most of us get fired at least once, if not twice, maybe 3 times, which, it used to be that in broadcasting, I remember when I first got into broadcasting and like people I knew who had like real jobs, they would say, well, how long are you going to be there? And I would say, well, I have a 3-year contract. And well, what happens at the end of that? Well, I get a new contract, or maybe I don't, or maybe I go somewhere else. Yeah. And they were like, oh my God, how can you live like that? But now, Paul, as you see and I see, everybody lives like that. Nobody has a guarantee anymore. My dad worked for Sears his entire adult life. That doesn't happen anymore. That kind of loyalty to your workers or your workers to you doesn't exist anymore. Everybody lives like we've always lived.
Right. I can only speak for where I've worked, and I would say it's absolutely true for where I have just worked, where a lot of the loyalty that was there as part of the culture that I, was there for so many years, that seems to be gone. The corporate influence is much larger now, I think, than it used to be. It used to be all about WGN, and now it's more about the folks who own it. But listen, nothing you can do about it. It changes. I've always viewed the work I did on air as, I was a teacher for quite a while, teaching University of Illinois and Pepperdine and places. I always viewed it it as teaching. That when you're doing journalism and you're, especially my world, when you're talking about politics and law, you're essentially teaching people because most people don't have those backgrounds. And so, as you know, my work as an analyst, not as a commentator. So people still, they see me on the streets. Oh, I liked your commentating, and I say I wasn't a commentator, because if I was that, then I would be telling you who's right and wrong. What I did was establish both positions, and you decide which way you wanted to go with it. Doesn't mean everybody heard me that way. People hear it the way they want to hear it. But I always viewed it as teaching, as educating people so they could make more, especially when it came to the Constitution and the law, because that's something people just go political with, and you really have to think like a lawyer. And I teach constitutional law for the Bar Review course. You have to think with that kind of mindset, I think, to understand sometimes what the court has done or hasn't done.
Explain. That's very interesting. I didn't realize that you taught constitutional law, because it seems to me that the Supreme Court we have now, and maybe this is unfair, but it seems to me they decide what outcome they want, and then they take the constitutional law and they twist it into whatever shape it needs to be in to justify what they wanted to do in the first place. Because it seems to me that the Constitution seems very, very Play-Doh-like in their hands. What's your thought on this, Paul?
Well, I've been a lawyer for 40 years, and I've been admitted to the Supreme Court, and so I've always revered the Supreme Court. But I'm not going to disagree that in the last period of years, the court has certainly taken on the kinds of decisions whenever that appear far more political than they do legal. Look, it is true. The reason cases make their way to the Supreme Court is because sometimes there are two viable sides to an issue, and the court has to lean which way it's going to go. Now, some would say, well, you're just saying that because there's a conservative majority, so they're making a lot of conservative decisions, and that's not political. That's their leaning. And I would have accepted that until the Biden term, because essentially what this court has done, and I think you're right, I think it may be true of a lot of judges that they kind of know where they want to end up, and then they have to have the clerk write a legal brief to get them there. Here's where I want to go. Tell me how I get there. But, now when you see this Supreme Court with a lot of 6-3 decisions, and it looks like it's ideologically, differentiated, and it often is, but essentially you'd say, well, they have empowered they've empowered President Trump, but let's remember what they've done isn't just only Trump gets the power and then it expires in 2028. No, every future president, if the next president is J.B. Pritzker or whoever it is, they will have the same extensive power the court gave to Trump. But here's why I say it's become political, because in the Biden years, when Biden attempted to use his executive power to, if you remember, either defer or to forgive student loans, remember that?
Yep.
And the Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. Only Congress has the power of the purse, has the power to control money. Okay. Fair enough. And Biden, who, when that decision came down, said, okay, I'm going to try another way around to get it. And the court essentially just always knocked him down, saying, sorry, get in your lane, Mr. President. That argument of get in your lane has gone by the wayside during this current Trump term. And at the end of, arguably at the end of the last term, but certainly this term, the immunity decisions, which kicked off this whole thing, essentially saying there's very little that any president, I have to say that because more will come, I think, more than any president in that job essentially is immune for pretty much anything they do. So that gives any president the ability to do carte blanche, and all part of the job, and the Supreme Court will stand behind it. And then, of course, because the power of pardon is is unquestionable, that, and we've heard this reported in Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan's new book, Regime Change, an incredible book, by the way, whatever side of the aisle you're on, it's an incredible book. And they talk about the fact that even Trump has said, and he changes the number, but anybody within 250 feet of the Oval Office, 200 feet of the Oval Office, will get a pardon before he leaves. So that's the way that any president can both protect themselves from anything they choose to do and then protect anybody around them with a pardon who may have tried to enforce their policies. So, yeah, I do think that because it's hard to explain why the court went one way under Biden and then a different way under Trump without arguing the same sort of power of Congress thing, I don't get it. That's the problem. And by the way, and I said this a lot on my own show to various Democratic congressmen, Congress has essentially been just neutralized. They almost don't exist under this president. And
by their
Republicans
own
control
choice.
It, they could do something. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And, in that book, Regime Change, I was reading about how, because, people are always like, well, Biden gave pardons too. In the book, they explain that Biden really struggled with, because Trump, when he was elected again, was so nice to Joe Biden. If Hunter needs anything, just call me. And so Biden wasn't going to pardon his family or some of the people that he felt would have been in Trump's sights until he saw who Trump was appointing to lead various agencies, who he was appointing to cabinet positions. And that's when he realized that while Trump had been very nice to him, the people he was appointing were clearly going to come after Hunter Biden and everybody else associated with Joe Biden. And that is when he, at the last minute, reluctantly decided to pardon everyone. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't it say in the book that the pardons were issued or became public while Trump was speaking at his inauguration?
Yeah, they were. You're talking Biden's pardons, right?
Yeah, Biden's pardons. I'm sorry.
Yeah. That all came out sort of as he left office and stuff, and whether by design or not, one would have to guess it was by design. But here's the thing: I'm not going to justify, when Biden pardoned his son. Look, whatever. I mean, if you were president, Joan, if I was president, I have to be honest. If my kid got into trouble, I probably would pardon my kid. I might, maybe not my dog for sure, but maybe the kid. Dog can do whatever he wants. But my point is that, every single president on their way out the door, Bill Clinton, they all pardon people that are really questionable. And they do it on their way out the door because they know what they're doing is questionable. I think for me, on day one, when President Trump pardoned the entire group of January 6th people. I mean, some insurrectionists, some not, whatever. And I get the argument. Some were just, walking around, and that's fine. There may be some that truly deserved a pardon. But this blanket pardon, which let people who clearly were, and they were convicted by juries, not by the Biden administration, but by juries of attacking cops, injuring cops, all the stuff that happened to cops, and they all walked. That, to me, is one of the reasons that Congress probably should attempt to review the pardon power. The problem is it's in the Constitution, and there are no limits on it in the Constitution. So not quite sure what Congress can do to you can try and put a limit on it, but that would make its way to the Supreme Court, and they would ultimately decide whether it's constitutional or not to do it.
I'm speaking with Paul Lisnek, Renaissance man. We are going to take a quick break. We're going to be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I am joined by Paul Lisnek. You have heard him and seen him on Chicago's airwaves for a very long time. When the Museum of Broadcast Communications opens up again, I say we do a field trip to visit the Paul Lisnek exhibit. I know him personally. Maybe he'll autograph something for us, like a program or something.
You know it. And by the way, I've been was at WGN for 18 years. I've actually been doing this stuff for 40. So because I was on the air I started with NBC during the OJ case and whatever, and Comcast and all sorts of stuff. So there's been lots of years of doing all of this. And I should say the Museum of Broadcast Communications is open. It's just a much smaller location right now with just kind of the Johnny Carson. They just got the Stephen Colbert set that will be on exhibit this summer. They just don't have the space at this time until they find a more permanent space to put everything back the way it was.
Yes. Well, we will look forward to that day, and we will do a field trip when that happens.
Let's do it.
So are you still teaching the constitutional law course for people to brush up for the bar?
So, the course is called, it's Barbary. That's kind of the very popular course. And it used to be that I used to travel the country over the summer teaching. I teach constitutional law and I teach ethics. So those are the two areas of teaching, along with a practice skills thing that they have to do in certain states. But that's all become video now. And so I'll have people stop me on the street and just go, oh, I watched your ethics video and, I passed, which is great news, but it's been a few years since I've recorded that. So, yes, I still teach those topics. I've been teaching con law since 1998 or so, and but again, now it's video, so it's just updates and that kinds of things as they're required. But that's the kind of stuff that I love talking about with you and also on TV, because again, people just non-lawyers will look at what happens and make the political judgment about it. But it's always useful to understand how a judge did what they did. Tomorrow, by the way, as you know, the Todd Blanche hearings get underway in front of Congress. He is governed by the ethical code and all of that, and it's fascinating. It'll be fascinating to see how the senators, at least those who are lawyers, approach him and what they ask him about, because essentially what he's been doing has looked very much like somebody who was acting as the lawyer for the president. What's been lost in this term, there is meant to be an independent distinction between the Department of Justice. I trained the Department of Justice for about 20 years at their advocacy center, so I understand DOJ, and there should be a differentiation. We've lost that differentiation, and I think Todd Blanche has lost the distinction between what it means to be the lawyer for the people, which is what the Attorney General is, and the lawyer for the president, which is not what the Attorney General is supposed to do. Whether you love Trump or you hate Trump, it has nothing to do with it. The Attorney General is not the lawyer for the president.
There is a move, a petition brought by lawyers and retired judges in Florida to do a disciplinary hearing for Pam Bondi, possibly removing her Florida law license. The federal judge who just ruled in this IRS case that Trump, where he gave himself money and he gave himself freedom from audits. The judge in that case not only refused to go along with it, but also recommended that the prosecutor in Florida also be investigated to potentially lose their license. That judge sent those summaries to New York and requested that an ethics board there look into whether or not Todd Blanche should keep his law license for what participation he had in that matter. Paul, when a board looks at somebody about taking away their law license, what are the criteria? What do they look for?
Well, it's a great question, Joan, because no surprise, I was a commissioner here in Illinois for 25 years dealing with disciplinary allegations against a lawyer here in Illinois. And the bottom line is that every state has an ethics code. And there's an ABA ethics code, American Bar Association, but that's a code that's either adopted by the state or usually adopted with modifications. Florida, for example, I always used to have to teach an ethics course down there separately because they have lots of quirky things in their code. But the bottom line is, and you don't have to get deep into a code to see why all the lawyers, and you mentioned them, you're right, it's not just Pam Bondi, it is Todd Blanche, it's all of them. Because essentially what they did was, in order to have a lawsuit, you have to have one party versus another party, and they need to have adverse interest. Otherwise, you don't have a lawsuit, right? If you and I are friends, what are we suing each other for unless there's an adverse interest? And so in this case, Todd Blanche essentially argued, I get to represent the president and I get to represent the government in both of these, which you can't, because you have to have a diverse interest there. And in that case, the president was sort of the head of the executive and the way they run it, the head of the DOJ. And so this deal they struck, the law is pretty clear that it all has to do with the release of his tax returns, Trump's tax returns a while back. The guy that did it was wrong to do it. He went to jail. I think he's been fined. I'm not sure about the fine, but that's happened. But essentially, they strike this $10 billion lawsuit. It's Trump suing himself. They couldn't do that. So in the end, they say, well, no, what we'll do is we'll settle for $1.8 billion. That's that whole slush fund thing I think you referenced, where the thought is a lot of that would go to the January 6th defendants, people who were charged in that case. All of that is problematic. Finally, the judge who had actually stepped out, because Todd Blanche said, hey, look, we've come to terms. We have an agreement. So you have no jurisdiction here, Judge. You can't do anything. And the judge said, not so fast. I have jurisdiction. That's where we are now. So they will challenge the judge, saying, you don't have a right to step in. The judge will say, yes, I do. And the bottom line here is, I think ultimately the judge will have jurisdiction, because this is a deal that makes no sense. It's between two agreeing parties, and it looks like a deal that's been put together simply to accomplish a desired end, which is create this fund so that the government can give it to a bunch of people who most people would argue don't deserve it, without any way to challenge it. It's all meant to be secretive. You would never even know unless they told you who gets the money. So really, really sleazy to use the word that it is. Todd Blanche says, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do it. But when asked to put it in writing, he won't put it in writing. So
exactly.
Something's up. We don't know what it is. We'll see what the judge does. Yeah.
Paul, this has been so delightful talking to you. I hope you will consider coming back and joining us again.
I'd love to talk to you anytime, Joan. You're the best.
Well, you're very sweet and you're very kind. And you're also you have a resume that, frankly, makes me a little jealous and makes me a little resentful. But I'm trying to be the bigger, better person and saying, okay, well, that just makes you more interesting now, doesn't it? But
that just makes me more old. You called me Renaissance man so time. I'm going to hang up and I'm going to go read some Shakespeare as soon as we're done.
Sweetie, when you said you spent 40 years in broadcasting, I started at Channel 7 in the 80s, so I'm right there with you. Probably a little older than you.
1986. 1986 is when I began. Yeah.
Well, take care, my friend, and I hope you'll join us again in the future.
Look forward to it. Thanks so much.
We are going to take a break. We'll be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I am very pleased to welcome another new voice to our airwaves, the Vilas Distinguished Achievement Professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Professor in Journalism and Mass Communication. Youngmi Kim is here. Professor, thanks so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
I want to talk to you about this study you were a part of that looked at digital voter suppression advertising. First of all, explain what digital advertising for an election is. What constitutes that?
Yeah, digital campaigns like online ads you would see while you're browsing on the web or while you're using like a social media, you see like a sponsored news feeds.
So an actual like advertisement, you're not talking about just somebody posting a TikTok?
No, actual advertisement purchased by advertisers at sponsors.
The kind of thing where you click the X to get rid of it and hopefully it goes away.
Right.
Is it effective? Right. Because, I've been reading now, television stations, they're not getting the political ad revenue they once did. And, that people are foregoing radio and TV for the digital world. And I've never really understood what that meant.
Well, in fact, like a news industry, for example, has been their viewership and an audience, like a readership, has been like a decreased over time, and it's true that people are moving to a digital, moving online. So political campaigners try to chase these people by moving online, going online.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you want to place a political ad on Channel 7, you call up the sales department. If you want to put a political ad on Facebook or Instagram, is there a sales department that you call up to do that as well? Clearly, I know nothing about this.
Not many people know about how it works. So let me explain something. It's very easy. You can create an account, or you can use your existing account if you have, and then you just click advertisement. I want to buy ads. Then it just provides a menu option. You can put some keywords. Like if you are trying to target gun owners, you can use the term a Second Amendment. Or if you are trying to target non-white voters or African American voters, then you can use the term something they would be interested in: Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X. And then this is in fact what Russian disinformation campaign did in 2016 elections. They used these terms to target African Americans in the United States. Then just the Facebook or Instagram will just give you audience.
I read about some of those voter suppression tactics, And correct me if I'm wrong, it was, posting stuff on social media that was designed to convince people that, their vote didn't matter, or, it just wasn't, there was going to be too much of a hassle. Is that what we're talking about here?
Yes, and that's exactly what we found. So election doesn't matter, don't go to the poll, neither candidate cares about us. So there is no point of voting or stay home, the line is too long, things like that.
And how do you measure what effect those kinds of ads have on people?
Very good question. So the problem of this, digital campaigns, is that unlike TV, which are randomly distributed to across the nation, and or in media market, specific media market, which the United States have 210 media markets. The digital ads are secretly distributed. It's not visible because it only targeted people they're supposed to target, and it only appeared to people, ad sponsors targeted. So we as an investigator, journalist, or researchers cannot see, as appeared on your Facebook newsfeed. So that is a great challenge for people like me who try to understand what kind of messages are distributed and who are getting these messages. So what I did is my team developed an eScope, that real-time ad tracking tool that directly measured exposure to digital ads. That worked like an ad blocker, but instead of blocking ads, we captured the ads with the associated meta information, like a timestamp and then where it came from, things like that, and then sent all the information to my research server. So that's how we made the invisible visible. So we are able to track not only the content of the ads or message of the ads, but also be able to reverse engineer who are exposed to what kind of messages.
So give me an example of one particular election you looked at, and in that election, how much voter suppression you found with these targeted digital ads.
Yeah, for example, in the 2016 presidential election, when the intelligence reports and investigators have raised a concern about targeted digital voter suppression. So there was some anecdotal evidence that there was some voter suppression campaigns by Russians, for example, but we never know to what extent voter suppression was extended, and who exactly received and exposed to this voter suppression ads. So by tracking this the entire digital campaign exposure patterns, more than 10,000 people representing the U.S. voting age population, we found that voter suppression ads are unevenly distributed. There is a clear geo-racial targeting patterns. In other words, non-white voters, especially non-white voters who are living in racially minority counties in battleground states, such as Milwaukee counties in Wisconsin, Philadelphia counties in Pennsylvania, they received 10 times more voter suppression ads than their full counterpart, in this case, white voters who are living in white majority counties in non-battleground states.
Interesting. And as you look at these and track them, who pays for these? Who's doing this? Is it a certain political party? Is it a foreign actor trying to influence an election? Can you back engineer these to figure out where they came from and who bought them?
Sure. So we found that like these targeted voter suppression ads are mostly done by so-called undisclosed campaigns. So the campaigns did not file a report their disclosure to the Federal Election Commission. So there are some exceptions, like some public advocacy groups, or political action committees, if they don't support the particular candidates or against the particular candidates, or they don't do specify, they don't use so-called magic words, express advocacy, then they are not subject to a disclosure requirement. But even that, include that, this a lot of this voter suppression ads are sponsored by unknown, unidentifiable groups, including foreign election interference campaigns like Russian disinformation campaigns.
Interesting. I want to ask you more about that, but we need to take a break. I'm talking to Professor Youngmi Kim from the University of Wisconsin at Madison, professor in journalism and mass communications, who has studied digital voter suppression advertising. We're going to continue this talk right after a break.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm talking to Professor Youngmi Kim from the University of Wisconsin at Madison. Professor Youngmi Kim has done a big study that looked into digital voter suppression advertising. You know, the kind of digital ads that try to convince people, or maybe a certain demographic of people, that, you know, your vote doesn't really matter, voting is too much trouble, et cetera, and so forth. Since you've looked at this and you've been able to quantify some of these results, what do you think we should do? Are there certain laws we should pass at the state level, pass at the federal level? How do we make sure that people don't have undue influence on elections?
Yeah, that's a good question. But before we discuss some policy implications, I just want to point out that the most unique things about this study is that not just we identify who are exposed to digital voter suppression and who are exposed to digital voter suppression, and then found geo-racial targeting patterns. But it actually influenced the actual voter turnout. We linked our 10,000 people who participate in this study, their actual exposure patterns, exposure to voter suppression, and then their actual turnout, verified turnout records. So we can identify people who are exposed to voter suppression ads, and then who are not exposed to voter suppression ads at all, and then compared their differences in terms of a turnout. And then we found that the exposure to voter suppression ads, in fact, decreased the turnout at the population level about 1.9%, which is equivalent to 4.7 million fewer votes. And then at the more targeted level, so non-white voters who are living in minority majority counties in battleground states, their turnout rate was 14% lower than that of their counterparts. So it has a measurable impact, and it is consequential. So this is not something, this is not just about a few Facebook ads or Instagram posts. It is a systematic pattern, and then campaigns a shift from a persuasion or get out the vote type of mobilization to demobilization. because like elections are competitive, and then in politically highly like a politicized environment, it's not enough to just like reinforce their support bases. Like they need to break the coalition from the opposition, and then have the opposition side like stay home. So a lot of like regulations are just to focus on like so far total spending on ads or message content, whether there is a clear advocacy, like a persuasion messages or mobilization messages, not so much about like a targeting patterns. So I think like one thing we need to pay more attention to is the targeting part. What kind of a data campaigns use like to target like a specific segments of the population? What kind of a targeting criteria they are using? We need some kind of a transparency and accountability for that, because I think this is so not everyone is weighted equally from like a campaign's perspective. So that is a violation of voting rights, I believe. So to protect the voting right in this highly data-driven, micro-targeted, and algorithm-based information environment, we need to come up with some policy solutions that protect everyone's voting right by making algorithmic processes and then data modeling and targeting processes are more transparent and accountable.
As just a regular old person who votes, are there any, if I see some of this stuff on Facebook or whatever, are there any red flags that would tip me off to the fact that this is somebody who's trying to manipulate me in an inappropriate way?
Yeah, that's a very good question. A lot of like people are just focusing on like a fact checking, whether this is like a fact or not. But I want I want people to pay more close attention to who's gonna benefit the most by sending this information to me. And then that would be like most helpful to detect some anti-normative, anti-democratic like messages, or something that campaigns like try to influence you, and then they have like a clear intention, and then if you try to understand the benefits they are getting from this deliberate intended messages, that would be the better way to detect such information, like a targeted voter suppression message.
This study, it's really good information that people should have. Other than joining me on the radio to talk about this, how are you getting the word out to actual everyday voters about this?
I talk to a lot of people, including people who are working on the get out the votes campaigns, voter consolidation groups. Of course, my students and others. I try to say that campaigns have shifted their focus from persuasion, which is hard to achieve, or even mobilizing uninterested voters that is incredibly difficult. But targeting by using these digital tools, even AI, they have synthetic database modeling, which is very cost effective and precise a targeting tool. With this tools, you could precisely target people who would be most vulnerable, who already have some barriers to voting, juggling multiple jobs and it's like the poll place is too far away. I don't have any transportation means, things like that. So they can identify these people precisely and then send out voter suppression messages like election doesn't matter, like don't go to the polling place. So I want like people to pay more attention to this demobilization tactics, who are not voting, why people don't want to vote, things like that. And then in the long term, these like messages like precisely target like people who are resentful about politics, who have like a relatively low confidence in political systems. So we have to work toward restoring trust at the community level.
We do, as I'm sure you're aware, we have an election coming up, a big one in about 3.5 months. Is there anything that you are going to be studying about this upcoming election specifically?
Yeah, I'm, as I said, like, I'm interested in this, like, no voting or non-voting behavior. So I'm trying to understand the mechanisms. And then one of the mechanisms was like a targeted digital voter suppression. And then I tried to understand like better. And then a midterm election is really important because, midterm elections have like historically have like a lower turnout rate. So like who's going to show up at the voting booth makes like a really big difference. And then like in this political environment, like we have debates, intense debates about voter ID, gerrymandering, redistricting, voter data, centralization. And then if you think about all of these issues, there is one thing in common. It is all about the control over the representation in political participation. So we need to have like a better understanding of how this new technologies or data-driven information environment, political environment, contribute to this control fight over the control in like the representation and political participation.
Doing what I do, talking politics with people every day, I'm always trying to figure out anything that I can say that might motivate people. You mentioned midterms, they don't get the turnout that a presidential election gets. But this midterm is so crucial. And I would love to do whatever I could to encourage as many people as possible to get out and vote. Is there something specific you would have me focus on, or something specific I should talk about to maybe spur someone who's on the fence about voting?
Well, I could, share this clip with as many people as possible. I think it's awareness that there are people. It's not just the Russians. It's not just the foreign actors. There are a lot of it because these are not totally, under the below the threshold of public scrutiny. Not many people know that there are tons of targeted voter suppression ads. Maybe because we're not targeted, but awareness is the first step. And then if you see some messages that describe politics as something useless, and therefore your vote doesn't make any difference, then put some skeptical some dose of healthy skepticism, and then think about who's going to benefit from this kind of messages, and then talk to policymakers, spread the words, share the messages with the policymakers. Campaign finance law should focus more on targeting rather than just ad content and ad spending. and then also we need to protect the voting rights in the 21st century data-driven political information environment. We cannot protect democracy by 20th century rules while campaigns are utilizing 21st century cutting-edge technologies. Yes.
Professor Young-Mi Kim, thank you so much for sharing your work with us. Really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you for having me.
That's going to do it for me today. Driving at Home with Patty Vasquez is up next. She's going to joined again by Reed Collum, chair of the Democratic Party of DuPage County. And remember, Richard Chu will be here tomorrow at 6:30. No, 6 o'clock. What am I talking about? I gave him an extra 30 minutes to sleep in? No, he doesn't get that. He'll be here at 6. And he's going to talk to Eddie Glaude Jr., professor of African American Studies at Princeton. I'll be here at 2. David Hochberg's joining me at 3. Have a great evening. Hope to see you tomorrow on the radio. Good night.